Hello and welcome. This is Matthias 76. Together, we are decoding the deception, and we're continuing here in the first chapter of Paul's first letter to the Corinthians. And in order to really understand it, to really take it in, what we need to do is spend some time beforehand getting the correct cultural appreciation of the cross, because you and I, and the way we think of the cross, more than likely it is different than the way the people to whom Paul was writing, the people of his day, viewed the cross. For us, we've got 2,000 years of history of it being a symbol of the Christian faith, of Christ's victory, etc. That is a cultural view of things that the Corinthians didn't have. It's not something that they understood that way. The cross was just a little bit of history. The cross and death on the cross was invented by the Babylonians, not the Romans. The Romans were very inventive on their own. They don't get enough credit for that. The Romans were very inventive, but a big part of the brilliance of Rome was they were more than happy to take what others had used, what others had created, used, put into play, and appropriate it for themselves, and sometimes perfect it. So the Babylonians had come up with the cross as just an absolutely horrible way for someone to die. It was something that it was used frequently in the Roman Empire, but it wasn't just used for everyone who was executed. It's not that all people who weren't Roman citizens, if they were put to death by Rome, they were put to death on the cross. That's not necessarily the case, but the cross was the death of the vilest of criminals. That's how they died. It was designed to humiliate. They always have, as this image that I have here on the screen, they always have the people on the cross partially clothed. They were not. It was designed to cause horrible, agonizing death for those upon whom it was inflicted. They suffocated, is how it worked. That's why they broke Jesus' legs, so he couldn't push up through the nails in his ankles, not his feet, the way they always depict it, and not like we see here through the hands. It was through between the two bones of the radius and the ulna of the arm, and then there was rope tied so that they could not, in desperation and sheer agony, pull themselves free from those massive equivalent of railroad spikes. That is the degree of desperation that those who suffered this indignity, this horror, would do. Most people on the cross, they could be there. A healthy, strong guy could be there for days before he would die. This understanding, the Gentiles understood it for what it was. The Jews understood it for what it was. If we take the Jewish expectation of what the Messiah was to be, what his mission was, what they envisioned as an earthly kingdom, this wasn't the end that they would have seen at all. At all. And the Gentiles all knew what this method of death was about. Now, what we're dealing with in our text, Paul is talking to the Corinthians. The Corinthians are Greek. The Greek civilization what had been before Rome and still existed to some extent in Rome, but certainly its heritage, lineage, and pride were there. The Greeks were the learned. They were the philosophers. You study ancient philosophy, I don't care who it is, Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, Heraclitus, whoever you want to pick, you're studying Greek philosophy. They're the ones who came up with much of the way we think today. It's foundational to human thought. The Corinthians were Greek. What they expected, what impressed them, their worldview was shaped by that heritage, that perception, that value system that valued the ability to speak, oration, thought, being able to present your ideas in an intelligent way that would touch others, and not just in an intelligent way, in an eloquent, persuasive way. This is Paul's audience. Even the Jews who were there in Corinth were going to have their worldview shaped by that system, that belief system, if you will, just as our worldview is shaped by our belief system. And I'm here in the United States. I know not everyone out there in the audience is, but we could probably all agree, rightly or wrongly, the United States and what it has achieved, what it has accomplished, the standard it sets as far as comfort, prosperity, all of those things is the gold standard throughout the world that others emulate. And what is it that we value? We value success. We value power. You know, those things, success and power, wealth, you got those three. That's the American way. That's the American way. We value those things. The Corinthians valued eloquence, intelligence, the ability to present thought, etc. Not that they didn't care about power and wealth and those things, but I'm trying to make the point. We're all shaped by the system in which we are brought up. It is the fabric of the reality in which we exist. So, Paul has started off, let's go back up. He started off in his section here on Thanksgiving. What did we talk about? How he makes it very clear. It's all about what God has done for you and not about who you are and what you are and how you have accomplished these things. It's a very low key, but he's setting the stage. Then, and the whole point is, he doesn't come right out and say it, because it probably wouldn't be an effective way to communicate with them, to persuade them, to get them to listen. But he's basically saying it's not about you. You're nothing special. You're nothing all that impressive, even though, yes, you're very gifted by worldly standards. Intelligent, articulate, all of those things. Spiritual gifts, they had them in spades. But they were proud. They were proud. What does pride lead to? That's what we talked about last time. Divisions in the church. You've got to be the one who's right. We're the ones who are following the right guy. Apollos, Paul, Cephas, Jesus, whatever. And that discussion, I'm not going to redo the whole thing, but he ends it like this. For Christ did not send me to baptize, but to preach the gospel, and not with words of eloquent wisdom, lest the cross of Christ be emptied of its power. Now let's go back to thinking about that image I had on the screen. Cross of Christ, power. In a worldly sense, there is no connection between the two, just the opposite, diametrically opposed from power. It was disgrace, death, humiliation. But Paul is talking about it being powerful, that the cross of Christ not be emptied of its power. Now he's going to explain that to them. For the word of the cross is folly to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. Stop there. The word of the cross. The word is logos. You can see it right over here. I got the Greek up here tonight. Logos, right there, just like Christ is the logos, the word. That Greek word logos carried a lot of weight in philosophical thought. It's the net sum essence of everything when it stood on its own. Okay. Now he's using that in connection with the cross. The net sum essence of the cross is folly to those who are perishing. A little bit more Greek. Let's look over here. See this word. Moria. Moria. This is an M. This is an O, a long O. This is an R. That's an I. That's an A. M-O-R. Moria. About 65% of English language comes from Latin. About 15 to 20% comes from Greek. We've got an example right here with Moria. It is where our word moron comes from. Here it's translated as folly. But folly can have kind of a light, happy-go-lucky. It's hard to come up with a word. It's moronic. It wouldn't flow. It wouldn't be pretty. But this can rightly be translated, for the word of the cross is moronic to those who are perishing. It's idiotic. It doesn't make any sense. But they're perishing. And we're not. We're being saved. But to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. We have to just accept. As believers, we need to accept, embrace, be content with the reality that the world isn't ever going to accept us for what we are. They're not going to view our belief system as something that's valid, as something that's commendable, something laudable, something to be looked up to, something to be accepted. If you really get down to the essence of what we believe, that God died on the cross for sinners, they will think that to be moronic. That's what Paul's saying. Deal with it. That's the way it is. For the word of the cross is moronic to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. We're completely, distinctly, and totally in every other way different than them, because Christ has made us different than them. He's opened our eyes to see. He's opened our ears to hear. He's opened our hearts to receive things that don't make any sense to them. And at one time, they didn't make any sense to us. He continues, going to quote some Isaiah here. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and the discernment of the discerning I will thwart. God, in his wisdom, God, in his infinite capacity to undo all that opposes him, that stands against him, uses the very thing that they think is ridiculous, a plan they think is ridiculous, to save his children. Why? I'll give you a hint, because it's all about him and it's not about us. Our wisdom is all about us, and it's not about him, human wisdom. You and I have true wisdom. That wisdom comes from him. Paul goes on, and he's talking to these Corinthians who are all hung up on pride, all hung up on the very things that are the foundation of their belief system, their world. And he's asking them, stop and take a look. Think about this differently. You're going about it all wrong. We do that. The Lord has called out to me in different ways at times in my life and said, you wonder why you're struggling? It's because you're looking at everything all wrong, from the wrong perspective, with the wrong understanding. So he's talking to these Corinthians who are all about wisdom and all that stuff. Where is the one who is wise? Where is the scribe? Where is the debater of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? The very thing that is the anchor of our salvation, Christ's sacrifice on the cross, they view as foolish. They're not here with you. They're not here with you. And he'll say some things later on. You know, the Corinthians, they were all into that belief system, into that way of thinking that the philosophers, the whoever you want to pick, all the philosophers who did nothing but stand around all day and swap ideas, they were the ones who were looked up to. But they weren't there with them. The Corinthians, relatively speaking, to those people who were the pinnacle of their society, were a bunch of nobodies. But still, that's what they emulated. So where is the wise? Where is the scribe? He's like, look around. Do you see him next to you? No, they're not here. Where is the debater of this age? The ability to debate, to overcome someone else's ideas in the arena of public opinion and overcome them. That was like the zenith of philosophy. Has not God made foolish the wisdom of this world? The world would never have figured out how God was going to save us. It doesn't make any sense to the world. But God has made, and the same word is there, moronic, the wisdom of the world. It's not wisdom. It's foolishness. I used to joke. When I was way back in school, long ago in a galaxy far away, and I was in college, one of my majors was philosophy. And my joke at the time was that I was busy studying how the most brilliant people in the world were really kind of dumb. And there was some truth to that. They weren't as smart as they thought they were. And I wasn't saying I was smarter than them, but we are enlightened and they are not. They're being brilliant in the dark. They're speaking eloquently to the lost. For since in the wisdom of God, the world did not know God through wisdom. That was God's wisdom. God, if it was about us, what was the whole thing in the garden about? It was about pride. It was about ego. It was about doing it for yourself. If we could figure out how to save ourselves, it's just a continuation of Satan's deceit, his trickery in the garden. For since in the wisdom of God, the world, through wisdom, did not know God. They were lost. Their wisdom, that's what it got them. It pleased God through the foolishness, the moronic stuff of what we preach, to save those who believe. I am so grateful. And I've grown in my appreciation of this as the decades have passed. I am so thankful that my salvation is in no way dependent on me. I didn't have to figure it out. I don't have to be smart and more intelligent than others to keep it. It is purely grace, purely His gift. I don't want it to be something I can figure out. It pleased God through the folly of what we preach to save those who believe. What do the Jews do? The Jews demand signs. They wanted Jesus to perform miracles, I don't know, that would scare the Romans away. I don't know exactly what they had in mind. There were a lot of different thoughts about it, but they wanted signs. They wanted miracles. That's why Jesus kept his miracles pretty low key. When you think of what he could have done, what he did was really, it's amazing. It's astounding. But it was really pretty low key, the miracles that he did. Jews demand signs and Greeks seek wisdom. But we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and folly to Gentiles, but to those who are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God. For the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men. We're not delivering what they want. We're not delivering something we came up with. Think of what Paul was doing. Paul was armed with nothing but the message of a crucified Jew. And he was going around the known world proclaiming that. So were the other apostles, other disciples. That's what they were doing. And everyone had to think it was nuts. When you share the gospel with someone, a big part of why we're intimidated in doing that is that people will think it's nonsense. They'll think it's crazy. Even today, it was even more so for Paul because they had a better understanding, real life, probably firsthand, they'd seen it, understanding of what crucifixion was and who it was for. So the Jews demand signs, the Greeks seek wisdom, but we preach Christ crucified. That's what he is. That's what he is. He came to be the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. And that is a stumbling block to Jews. Many of them couldn't get past it because it's not what they wanted. They had concocted, taken the Old Testament and twisted it to meet their desires of an earthly kingdom that would put David's to shame. David really did have quite a kingdom. And for the Gentiles, it was foolishness. Go read Paul talking on Mars Hill at the Areopagus with, I think it's 1 Corinthians 18 or 19. 1 Corinthians, Acts 18 or 19. They basically said, who is this babbler? This guy going on, he seems to be preaching foreign gods. He laid the gospel out for them, and they didn't even get it. The smartest people in the smartest town didn't get it. They thought it was moronic. A stumbling block. That thing that you trip over. It's nothing good, right? But that's what happens. That's what happens when you think your wisdom is above God's wisdom. But God in his wisdom, he goes on, but to those who are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God. We've been called. They were called too, they rejected it. But we've been called into the fold. He's Christ. The cross is Christ, the power of God, and Christ, the wisdom of God. And here, saying Christ, he's calling to mind everything that Jesus was, all of his ministry, what he was about, what he accomplished, what he still was doing, his resurrection, everything else. Our biggest problem was death, eternal death. What did Christ undo? Through his death, he undid death. He defeated death. Death is dead. It's crushed. It's left in the dust because of Christ's victory. He entered death. He suffered death. And that's, you want to talk about foolishness. I can't claim that I can get my mind around the fact that God died. Well, but only part of God died because it's just the Son. You know, we can't even parse it. We can't divide it up. We can't figure it out. But God died. He died to undo death for us. And that crazy, foolish message of the cross, that thing that's a stumbling block, both the Jews who seek signs and the Greeks who are all about wisdom, that cross, and this is the way we come to see it. This is the way we interpret in the connotations, the thoughts that come to mind when we think of the cross. It is God's love for us, because Christ took our sin. Christ took the wrath that we deserve. He took our death, and he defeated it. He defeated it. That's the way we interpret. That's the way we understand the cross. That is the enlightened. You see the streams of light coming down in this image. That's the enlightened believer's interpretation and right understanding of the cross. It's something different altogether than what the unbeliever can get through their heads. But still, we preach that message because it's through the message of the cross that souls are saved. And Paul's point up above, he's not going to detract from that by thinking that if he speaks eloquently enough, if he constructs his thoughts, his speech in a way that leads from the one thing to the next thing that eventually gets them to understand. You can't get somebody to understand the cross. You share the message with them, and the Holy Spirit goes to work on them, because none of us spiritually are intelligent enough. We're dead. We're spiritually dead. Before salvation, we're spiritually dead. We're blind. We can't see it. And we're hostile to God. The carnal mind is enmity against God, right? It's only the Holy Spirit who can quicken us. The Spirit, God breathed into Adam. The Spirit of God hovered above the face of the waters in creation. The Spirit enters us and enlivens us, resuscitates us, and then inspires us. All those fire, respiration, inspiration, all comes from Spirit, right? He's the one who does it. And we don't believe it because it made sense to us. We believe it, we understand it, we place our faith in it because God enlightens us. He quickens us. He brings us to faith. But to those who are called, both Jews and Gentiles, God can save them all. But to those who are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God, or the foolishness of God. and again, that's the same word. Let's find it over here just to show you. See, there's and there actually it says moron, or the foolishness of God. You know, one of my favorite expressions is an oxymoron. An oxymoron is something that doesn't work, right? Like a skinny fat man or something like that. It doesn't work. And I used to joke that, you know, I went through high school just basically to play football and wrestle, and I was kind of an oxymoron. Oxy, big guy, moron. Anyway, the foolishness, the moronicness of God, it doesn't work. It's an oxymoron. The word moron is there, but it's an oxymoron. There's no foolishness of God. The world perceives it as foolishness. So it's an air quote, right? The foolishness of God is wiser than men. And the weakness of God so perceived by them. Because ultimately getting nailed to a cross, that's pure weakness. That's pure weakness. Why do you think Jesus made it so clear that he gave himself over to it? You have no power over me at all, he told Pontius Pilate. You have no power over me at all. The people who came to arrest him, one of my favorite quick little scenes in the whole gospel. Jesus knocked them down by saying, I am he. Boom. Knocked them down. He's telling them, I could undo you all. But I'm giving myself over to this. That's his weakness. His weakness took strength beyond anything that we can imagine as he prayed there in the garden. And his sweat became as drops of blood and said, Father, let this cup pass from me, but not my will, but thine be done. What is true courage? What is true strength? Doing what needs to be done because it has to be done, and you're the only one who can do it. That is true strength. That is true courage. And that is what the world would view as his weakness. But the weakness of God is stronger than men. So so much here, and Paul's not done talking about foolishness and wisdom and the power of God, and it's a theme that's going to continue on. He's going to go on. We're going to stop here because our time is up. He's going to go on talking about them because you were nothing special. You were nothing special. But there's this thing that can happen, and it is a destructive thing. And you've seen it. I've seen it. There is nothing more destructive to the unity of faith, and God desires all of us. It is a good thing when brothers live in harmony, when brothers live in unity, when we have the same purpose, and when we take the gifting of God and use it, allow it to metastasize into something bad that is pride in our own abilities, our own gifts, whatever it might be. It is divisive. It is a cancer in the church. It is a cancer in the human soul. And so Paul's going to spend some time talking about that, reminding them who they really are. That comes next time. This is Matthias 76. Together, we are decoding the deception. God bless and have a great day.